Right, how you feeling? You feeling okay?
I'm feeling okay.
You ready for this invigorating conversation about miracles?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if they're anything like our other conversations, then it should be very invigorating. I reckon.
Yes, I'm sure. All our conversations are invigorating. If only you could see our living room right now. We have set up a table in the middle with 2 microphones and the computer. And we're going to have a conversation all about miracles.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason I've invited Casey to have this conversation is because we constantly, I don't want to say fall out, but we have a differing of opinion when it comes to miracles, don't we?
Yeah, different is good. It doesn't feel good at the time,
Yeah.
but I suppose difference is good.
Variety is the spice of life and all that. So I think where we differ the most is probably at the beginning point. So any conversation about miracles, I always think that it's really important to define what our definition of a miracle is. And I think it's here that we can just not reach a consensus.
So from the get-go,
Yeah.
we disagree.
Right out the gate, we do not agree. What is it that you think that a miracle is?
I just want to start by saying maybe our marriage is a miracle. If we can't agree,
Maybe that it's lasted this long is a miracle.
If we can't agree on anything, which seems to be a theme of our marriage. So maybe that's a miracle.
Maybe.
Just to start off.
Okay.
But go on, what was your question?
My question is what is your definition of a miracle?
See, I mean, going to definitions is all very well and good. And, we can learn a lot from a definition and we should always seek out a definition. However, the common man and woman in everyday life sees a miracle, I think, from my perspective, from what I hear people talking about, from, I suppose, the gist that I get from certain movies or books or songs that have miracles, the idea of a miracle in it. The common man and woman wants to see something that seems impossible possible. So I think that's my definition.
Yes. So when the impossible becomes possible.
Yes.
Yes.
However, I know you're going to bring a definition in.
Yeah.
Which is going to, I suppose, make mine sound really vague.
No,
but
it's not. I suppose from your perspective right there and then, we have to have a conversation about what is possible and what's impossible. Because that's an ever-changing goalpost, I suppose. Maybe there are constant things that are always possible and impossible. That's where my definition of miracle starts. But it depends on what you think is possible and impossible.
Well, I think that comes from the individual experience of, and this is where we will massively disagree, because I suppose you will go on to say, I know what he's going to say, you will go on to say something about miracles being outside of the human experience or happening outside of the human experience.
Well, yeah and no, I think it's a miracle because we observe it to be a miracle. Otherwise it's just God flexing his normal supernatural self.
For me, miracles are really personal though, and they're more about the individual overcoming something. I suppose for me, what I was getting at before is the common man and woman seek miracles for their own hope.
Yeah.
But I think they also seek them in their own lives where things seem so dire that it seems like only a miracle, the hand of God,
yes.
God intervening,
yes.
could actually change this situation. And we see it over and over and over again in church, out of church, in the community. Jesus works in the community as well. And,
yeah. So can I say this then? For you, a miracle is an intervention by God, however big or small, an intervention in someone's life. It could be an intervention where the seas have parted and something miraculous has happened, or it could be an intervention that you never thought that you would pass your driving test and it caused you so much anxiety and stress, but you prayed to God and somehow that focus and that concentration that you were lacking before, it was there. It was a miracle. There was an intervention from God that calmed the storms in your life.
Yes. I think that would be a overview.
Yeah.
I mean, definitions are hard. I think we look at a definition of something and go, all right, the definition of a miracle is, and then we think, oh, okay, I didn't quite think a miracle was that. And it can be disappointing to look at a definition because it doesn't fit in with what you were hoping the definition would be sometimes. Yes. So yeah, I think it is about the intervention of God.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned the seas parting, which is a fantastic example of a miracle being observed or happening to a group of people.
Yeah.
But then I think of Jesus and the almost the mini miracles that he performed for the individuals as he went about his ministry. And for each one of those people, that was absolutely life-changing for them. So that was a miracle for them in their world, in their life experience, and it changed their life.
I suppose my issue is with that is ends up being, and this is going to sound really cynical, and I do apologise, but it ends up being anecdotal. And this is what happened in my life, and then that's an amazing testimony. And it's God is the God of the personal. He's a God of relationship. So it is important how he moves and acts within our lives. But if we're having a conversation about what is a miracle, what does the Bible state a miracle is, what do we understand a miracle to be today, I put that in quite a definitive bracket, which is a suspension, an overcoming and overpowering of the laws of nature, of the natural laws. So Jesus walking on water is a miracle because the laws of gravity says that he should be pulled into that water. Mm-hmm. So something miraculous happened. The laws of nature were suspended. He suspended them. He had dominion power over that so that he could do something miraculous. Okay.
Can we go to the definition?
I feel like that's the definition.
Well, what does the dictionary... I know obviously the Bible, it has authority, but what does the dictionary say? What does the dictionary say?
Are we Googling?
Well, I think that's what most young people and adults maybe would do, is they would even Google...
I think what I said is going to be the definition.
Oh, yeah.
Let's have a look. All right, we're going to go to Google. Other search engines are obviously available. Okay. So according to Google, a miracle is an extraordinary and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and is therefore attributed to a divine agency. So it is possible for you to pass your driving test, even though you feel as though it is impossible. So God may intervene, and that may in itself be miraculous because God has intervened in your life. But a miracle is when the laws of nature have been suspended by the one that created them.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah. So is it a spectacle then? Is it for many people?
Well, and this is quite interesting because the miracles, especially that took place in the New Testament, they were a process by which God was showing his divinity, that Jesus was showing his divinity, that he was proving who he was by the words that he spoke, but also by the miracles. It was that started to give him authority in this world.
I mean, I had a little thought because I've obviously done some research. Obviously. Because I'm, I need to have a good foundation in this to be able to have a good argument against you.
Not that you want to argue.
Yes. Yeah. So I did a little bit of research only on YouTube last night, but I was trying to get some credible sites.
Yeah.
So what question come up for me when we're talking then about the natural law? When you were just saying then about the natural laws and them being violated in some way or changed, suspended. I suppose I just wondered whether sin was natural or not. Is sin natural? Because I suppose if Jesus is healing sin, then he's suspending a natural behaviour of us. Is it in our nature to be sinful? Is it natural for us to be sinful?
So, really good question.
Great question. Thank you.
A great question. Is it your question? Did you find it?
It was my question. Yeah, it was my. Actually, I think I stole it from what looked like a sixth former doing a video on YouTube. So it wasn't my question.
So we have all fallen short of the glory of God. Because of the fall, because of what happened in Genesis with Adam and Eve, we are all have the pull of the flesh. We are all sinful in some capacity. So the sacrifice that Jesus made when he died and rose again, that was miraculous, because what it did is it reconciled us back to God. That was a divine intervention that reconciled us back with God. And if our human nature is that of a sinful one, to wash that away breaks the laws of nature.
Ah, brilliant.
You with me?
Yeah, so the question was, following on, would it be supernatural, aka a miracle, to overcome sin?
Yeah, so we can't do it on our own. It's not humanly possible.
Okay.
So because there's divine intervention, that's the way that it works. Are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the interesting debates that you hear at the moment is that the miracles in the Bible were real, but that time has ended, that there are no miracles now. How do you feel about that?
My mind immediately goes to people who are overcoming severe drug and alcohol addiction.
Yeah.
Like severe, like their path is so set. The social aspects of their path are ingrained into their lifestyle. Maybe they were brought up in them situations. Maybe they have done some awful things themselves. Maybe they've had awful things done to them, and they're just very hurt and very broken, and it just seems impossible. It seems impossible.
Yeah.
And those around them would judge it impossible that they were ever going to change, because people would be caught in this trap. So immediately my mind goes to, surely miracles are possible today, because people in them situations do change.
Yeah. You see, that doesn't meet my threshold for what a miracle is.
Why?
Though.
I don't understand why.
Because it's amazing, don't get me wrong, and I've got no doubt that there's a divine intervention in a lot of them cases. But we've used this term before, I call it a God wink, where God just does something in our lives.
That's not a wink.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but you know, somebody's life who's turned around to that degree, and I'm not saying that we should hold a measure and stick against somebody else's sin and say, oh, well, you know, they deserve salvation more. But surely that's not just a wink. I know anything from God is brilliant, but surely that's an intervention.
It is an intervention, but it's not one that suspends the laws of nature.
But if sin is natural, and it's part of our natural being, and they're living so entrenched in sin, to then overcome that with Jesus, is that not a miracle?
Oh, you're muddling. You're pulling together different things there, and it's confusing my brain.
Yes.
So we have established that Jesus' sacrifice is a miraculous one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that it wipes the slate clean. But a miracle in the physical sense for us to observe here, I think, is one that breaks the natural law, the natural order of things, suspends it, overpowers it. That story that you told, albeit it may have divine intervention, there will be stories that have exactly the same narrative that have no divine intervention, because it is humanly possible to overcome addiction. It is medically possible to overcome addiction, all these different things. So there are, because it's within our realm of expertise, that doesn't mean that it's difficult. And obviously you take each individual's capacity into that. So for one person to overcome smoking, it could be quite easy. And then for another person to overcome smoking, it could be the hardest thing that they've ever done. So if we were to look at maybe the way that you said it, that miraculous is that intervention for God intervening for those that maybe don't have the human capacity to do it on their own. And for a lot of us, that's who we are. Are you following me?
I get it. I suppose and maybe others feel the same, that everything I've ever known about miracles or I suppose hoped would be that they were for the common man and woman,
Yeah.
that they weren't reserved, I think, for a certain group of people at a certain time, that they were possible now, and that they do. It almost inspires hope to think that miracles are still possible now.
I think that they are still possible now.
Okay.
I haven't seen one personally. I've heard of them.
Our marriage?
Our marriage, again. Even may feel miraculous that we have survived this long. But I can assure you, the laws of nature have not been broken in keeping us together. Has God intervened? 100%. But the laws of nature have not been suspended. All right, maybe with just some of the smells in the house. Maybe there's a slight miracle there. But I suppose to bring in some philosophical theories, David Hume, which is one of the, he was one of the authorities of British and Scottish philosophical thought throughout the Enlightenment period, he proposed that it was ludicrous to believe in miracles. He said a wise man proportions his belief towards the evidence, and there is never enough evidence to believe in miracles. How do you feel about that?
I was reading something on my phone. I'm sorry. It sounded really good though.
Do I have to say it again?
Just, I suppose, in a snapshot.
A wise man proportions his belief towards the evidence, and there is never enough evidence to believe in miracles.
That's what Hume said.
Yes.
Okay, see, I'm learning this. Hume. He's a philosophizer.
Yes.
So you got to look for the evidence. He's saying look for the evidence. If the evidence is there, that proves it.
No,
science.
He says the weight of evidence has to outweigh the natural law in the first place.
Okay. Explain that a bit further.
So if you were to believe that somebody had flew, for example, had levitated themselves off the ground, not using any external like planes and all that kind of stuff. If you were to believe that someone had broke the law of nature, you would need more evidence to support that than you possibly have for the law of gravity. In order to believe that actually took place, that you weren't fooled, that you weren't tricked, that you weren't momentarily delusional. He said everything else is probably more likely.
It feels a bit like Sherlock Holmes.
Once you eliminate the impossible, you are left with the however unlikely.
Yes.
That's it, yeah. That was a good paraphrase on my part.
Yeah. So he's saying that we don't know, but we have to weigh up whether we think it's rational to believe in a miracle.
So Hume was all about perception.
Okay.
To a certain extent, he believed that when you look at an apple, you perceive the different aspects of the apple, and then the apple exists because you perceive it. So if you take away the sight, the smell, the sound, the feel, all the different senses that you have about that apple, he actually proposed that the apple possibly ceases to exist, that it only exists in its perception by us. Are you with me? So miracle kind of follows the same suit, and he's saying if we cannot have the weight of evidence to support it, then it's unreasonable for us to believe it.
Okay. I suppose, yeah, I can't help but come back to the personal experience then of a miracle. And I suppose the day and age that we're in now it's hard for people to believe miracles. I mean, I was Googling miracles last night, and on YouTube I seen a video of Fox News, and somebody had caught an angel on a CCTV camera that was looking out over the yard. And even being a Christian, looking at what looked like an angel, I was very skeptical. Very skeptical, because it wasn't my experience. I wasn't there. I didn't look. I didn't, I suppose, weigh up whether that could be glare off a light but people seem to be believing this report. So I suppose now we dig a bit further, I want to believe miracles exist, and actually I believe the biblical miracles, but I suppose maybe I'm skeptical of these laws of nature being changed
without your observation
without
of it.
Me being there.
So you have to observe it in order to believe it. That makes you the authority.
Yeah, but what about when you hear someone's testimony, and again, we're coming back to that personal experience. The individual. What about when you hear that person's testimony and you think, or you met them a couple of years before, and then you see a complete change in how they love others or treat others or speak about people even.
Yeah.
But again, we'll go, am I reducing a miracle again into...
An anecdote,
but I suppose more hoped for human behaviour, you know.
It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
God has the power to... It's hard, isn't it? I think that it's always going to be a sticky area when we look at miracles, because you do feel as though you've got to be a part of it in order to believe it. And that if you're not a witness to it, there's always a level of skepticism. But I suppose David Hume takes it that step further and says, even if you see something, it's more likely that you've suffered a delusion. In fact, he uses the example of a man being raised from the dead, and it's more likely that they've suffered a joint delusion than it is that they've witnessed someone raising from the dead.
And in some ways, I can listen to that definition of that philosopher and nod along and think, yeah, he sounds like he's got something there. But then when I think of Jesus and the impact that he has made throughout the last 2,000 years and the people's lives that are changed over and over and over again, I think that actually the miracles of the Bible are true and are right because of the impact that Christianity has and has had on the world. So I suppose then I can't agree with Hume in his definition of miracles, because then that would mean I don't believe what Jesus did was real. And I was, again, on YouTube, it was, who's that other guy? The Christian apologist.
Which one? Frank Turek.
Frank Turek, yeah. So
he wrote a book on miracles, very good.
Oh,
he also debated Christopher Hitchens, and it's on YouTube, on miracles, if anyone gets the opportunity to have a look at that debate.
He's an atheist, isn't he, Christopher Hitchens?
Christopher Hitchens was an atheist. He's died now. But yeah, he was very famous, very provocative, borderline rude sometimes, but quite interesting to watch. And he did debate some of the big names in theology at the moment, John Lennox and Frank Turek and people like that. So very good to watch.
And I think it's worth saying that part of this podcast series is about apologetics.
Yeah. It is, definitely. I mean, very sadly, Ravi Zacharias passed away this week. And those that follow us on Instagram will have seen that I put a post up about that. And it just reminded me how important it is to ask questions and to discuss them, and to not have maybe an objective of saying, well, this is what I want this person to believe by the end of this conversation, but to just listen and explore the different definitions and understandings, and just have a little bit of fun.
And ask them questions. That's the important bit, isn't it? So it's not about your opinion as a Christian. You ask them first and foremost. You inquire into them and their current thoughts, ideas, values.
Yeah.
And you respect them as well.
Yeah, because ultimately it doesn't matter what I think about miracles as a leader. It matters what you think about miracles and what information it is that you're inquiring about with miracles. And that's where the dialogue starts. It doesn't start with, let me tell you this. It starts with, well, what do you think about miracles?
I really like that about apologetics, and that... It's
not always done like that.
No.
Sometimes it can be quite fundamentalist and direct, and people want to argue. That's why it's quite popular in universities, because it is... it can be heated in debate sometimes. It shouldn't be, but things get like that.
Yeah. I listened to a podcast called Ask Away, which is part of Ravi Zacharias Ministries, and I really, really love how they approach questions and people who have different points of view to them. They're Christians and they're exploring different topics, that the world faces. And it's really, really encouraging that they massively respect people who bring questions forward and are brave enough to question Christians about their beliefs and are brave enough to disagree with them at times. But what they always do is they always build relationship and open up dialogue, and they spend time, I suppose, nurturing a relationship of respect in order then, I suppose, to learn from each other, but ultimately share the gospel. But it's just done in such a way, I think, where everybody's viewpoint is respected. You may not agree, but your viewpoint is respected and the other person's is
so
also.
Belief is important. Whatever it is that you believe, and it may be drastically different to what I believe, but it's valid. That doesn't mean that I agree with you, but we can, when we start from a place of respect, well, this is what you think and this is what I think, then we can have an honest dialogue about it. Like I was saying before, all too often, sometimes the objective is to batter someone with your opinion and say, this is what I think, you must think it too. And I have, in all my years of having debates and conversations and discussions, I've never ever seen anybody change their mind with that approach. All I have seen is arguments break out. And I think that's really important to realize that if you actually do want to change somebody's mind, it is more about listening and asking the right questions than it is ramming information down the throat.
And caring for them as well. Like, people need to know you're not just there to change their mind, but you actually care for them.
Yeah. And that's that personal touch. And that's that, like we were talking about with Jesus, Jesus is all about the individual.
But Frank Turek, if we can go back to
She's pointing a finger at me, just so you know. Frank Turek.
It happens multiple times a day.
Yeah.
So he talks about the miracles performed by Jesus in 4 key areas, he says in one of his videos. He says he performs miracles in the area of sin and the area of natural disasters or nature. So, for example, calming the storm or walking on water. He performs miracles in the area of healing and resurrection, so new life. And I just that.
So let's have a look. So what was the first one?
Sin.
What's an example of that? The paralyzed man. So in fact, we can include 2 within that, can't we? I love the story of the paralyzed man, where the 4 friends, they drag him to see Jesus. They lower him through the roof, and then Jesus looks at him, and he looks at his friends, and he says, "You are forgiven." And that's that. How important it is. We saw the man, we saw the broken man. That's what his friends saw. They were looking for healing. Jesus saw the soul, and he was looking for a different kind of healing. So we had 2 miracles: the miracle of healing the spirit, and then he did heal the man. Pick up your mat, off you go. So we got 2 there. What was the other ones?
So nature. You
gave an example for that. What did you give?
So Jesus calming the storm.
Yes.
So that he was able to intervene into nature and stop nature from expressing itself, I suppose. If it's
okay, all right.
Personify nature.
We won't pick up on that one just yet, but
and Jesus walking on water. So I suppose he's performing a miracle.
So that's in the nature.
That's
Sorry,
the
I
same.
thought you were taking that to a different category.
No, that's within nature. He performed that miracle.
All right. So we had the sin, the physical, the natural, and what was the 4th one?
Resurrection.
Okay, so like power over the grave.
Yeah, over death. Yeah.
Over death.
Yeah.
All right. I might be tempted to loop that into the kind of natural law, because what lives dies naturally. Although some might disagree, because energy just converts, energy never dies. So there might be some physicists out there that disagree with me. Don't disagree with me, please, because that's just what I think.
I like that you disagree with Frank Turek, and I just wrote down the 4 things he said as if they were gospel and true.
Yeah. I do try my best to disagree with most things at some point.
Oh, don't I know it?
Yeah. So I think that we've covered quite a lot there. We've touched on some philosophy, a bit of David Hume. One of the things that I didn't point out with David Hume is that his argument ultimately fails. This idea that a wise man proportions his belief towards the evidence doesn't work. Because if we were to believe that, then I actually would not exist. Because there is more evidence to suggest that I don't exist than I do. So it falls apart straight away. Don't you think? Don't you agree?
what do you mean by that? So how is there more evidence to...
Of all the evidence that exists in the world, of all the days that have been lived, of all the days that will come, of all the days that have been, of all the people who experience this life right now, living or have experienced this life, that have no knowledge or experience of me, there is more evidence to say I was never here than I am here.
Wow. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Therefore, I don't exist. See,
Okay,
David Hume.
So what he's saying is, if you can only if you can only perceive it,
Yeah.
then it's real. Only by perceiving it is
the
it real.
weight of evidence. So us perceiving it is
doesn't
not
matter.
it, but it needs to have the weight of evidence. Okay. So,
which we have to be careful of, actually, because what I think of then is Instagram accounts and Facebook accounts, and that's our evidence for existing. But actually, people create fake accounts every day.
It's really difficult. And observation, science is based a lot on observation. What we observe, and if we can continue to observe it, then it becomes scientific fact. But just an example of that is, for thousands of years, people observed the sun to rise and for it to set. So it was reasonable to suggest that the sun went around the earth, because that was what we observed. That was scientific fact. Actually, the more that we have been able to study, the more the world has been opened up to us, we know that's now not true. Flat earthers, listen, that is not true. The earth is not flat. The sun does not go around the earth. We do, in fact, go around the sun.
I have to agree.
As far as I believe. I don't know, are we getting into the murky waters of fact and belief? I don't know.
But back to miracles.
Let's put that one down for now. What was I saying?
Can we do a podcast on the universe?
Of course we can.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it. We'll see if we can get some other people involved. So if you're sat at home and you're screaming at us because you've got an opinion or a thought on this and you would like to share it, please do let us know. We can bring people into these podcasts via their phone.
Can we do Team Ashley, Team Casey?
No.
Oh, just wondering how many people.
I don't want you to get upset when no one's on your team. But we'll just do for and against. How's that?
Okay.
Yeah. So I've enjoyed this chat about miracles. I think, and I don't often say this, I do think you are right in some ways. I think any intervention by God is miraculous. And a miracle for me is more about timing than anything else. When something happens in your life, when you get that job, when life was just about to defeat you, or when that friend calls, when you were just in a place of despair and things like that, I do believe that God nudges us to be a positive influence in people's lives, and miraculously we can be lifted out of despair. But when I put my philosophy head on and my teaching head, I just can't reconcile them two together, because a miracle is something where the laws of nature have been lifted and overcome and overpowered. Because I can argue that. When I'm having a conversation with someone, we can have a debate about that because it's tangible. Having a debate about you passing your driving test when all seemed lost is not. It's not empirical. It's not something that we can pull apart and look at the evidence and examine it. It's personal. Do you get me?
I do get you. I do, and I respect your point of view about it needing to be something that spectacularly blows you away and defies the laws of nature. But I do.
There's always a but.
There's always a but. I do, I really do think that, like we said, God is a personal God, and He knows what's important to us, and He knows the path that we're on, and He knows, the options that we've got, and I just think that He can give us unimaginable hope, I think, through things that seemed impossible in our own lives.
And Scripture says constantly, especially throughout the New Testament, of when you believe, all things are possible. When you put your faith in Christ, there is nothing that isn't possible. And that's something that we really need to take to heart, whether you've seen a miracle or not, whether you believe a miracle is a suspension of the laws of nature, or whether it's an intervention in some aspect of your life, that there's nothing that God can't do, both in your life and in this world. He's got dominion over everything. but we put our faith in him and we ask him for them interventions. And we see in the Old Testament that when Israel asked, God intervened. And when we ask, if it's within his plan, he will intervene for us. I do believe that.
Yeah.
So we're finishing on a place of agreement.
We are.
That's good.
This is a new feeling.
Yeah, I know. Let's get married again. Let's do it. Well, I've enjoyed this chat. Hopefully we will do this again. And everybody, God bless. Have a good week. Questions, thoughts, please do get in contact. We would love to hear them. Other than that, see you later.